All right, it is time to introduce our first assignment. And a good way to start thinking about your assignment is to look at two areas of information. One is in your photo bucket page. We are out of exercises now. We are into assignments. You can look at the past student work. And so you go to the assignment folder. You go to the assignment we're doing. We're starting with assignment 1, Fantasy Landscape. And then there's subfolders. It's empty right now, just waiting for your brilliant work. But in the subfolder, you'll see some past student examples. And what you each will be asked to do for this project is to submit first sketches. And you should each have 2 sketches that don't look like much. This will be done in your sketchbook, and we'll scan them in next class. But they show your conception of how you'll blend together different references that you found in both a horizontal format and a portrait format. And then the next thing you'll show is your finished composite, where you put all those elements together into an original composition. If you're more comfortable with drawing and you want to flesh it out a little bit more, that's fine. But notice you'll very often have these little bullet points, because this is in your sketchbook, it's good for your reference, kind of describing the reference that you're wanting to use. And this isn't aspirational. This is based on reference that you're able to find that's high enough resolution that can build your vision. So you're piecing it together as you're looking for reference online. And the reason we do it that way is so that you are really creating your image. You're not just altering things you find. You are using the internet, and the images you find is basically your dollhouse kit. And you're deciding how you're going to stage them all together. And your sketch is what we're going to use to build up our composite. This student drew his sketch digitally, and that's perfectly fine too. But I find for Digital 1 students, it's good to do it by hand often because that feels more direct. But you're definitely allowed to draw digitally if you like. So, what is a fantasy landscape? Well, it's whatever you want it to be. It can be on any planet, any universe. It can have any kind of laws of physics that you want to apply. It can have any kind of color spectrum, any kind of textures. It can be apocalyptic. It can be Martian. It can be alien. It can be a jungle. It can be underwater. It can be free-floating in space. So I don't really want you to have any preconceptions. But it can be a good idea before you start thinking about your own interests to just do a search for fantasy landscapes in Google. And you'll realize that there are a lot of them that are made, because nowadays for any kind of project development, whether it's a movie or a video game or a cartoon or a comic, whether it's set in kind of a fantasy medieval times or fantasy caveman times or an ice age or on a different planet, in the future, in the past, it has to be conceived first with pre-production art, conceptual art. And you'll see there's just no end of it. Yes, it makes sense. Okay, so you can feel intimidated seeing this past student work, and you can feel intimidated looking at like professional work like this, which is a digital concept painting, you know, beautifully done, probably for a movie concept. And the reason they'll have artists do it from their imagination first is to decide, okay, what are we actually going to spend money to build sets on and to light? But all I can say is don't be afraid to get started at it and just run through the steps. You're going to find that it's all possible. And don't limit the ambition of your idea based on your worries about what you're going to be able to accomplish. Because we're going to get very good at this. But this is just our first tackling at compositing together. All right, so what I would like you to do is find one you really like. And I quite like this. This looks fun. And I'm going to call this my exemplar. So I'm going to save that to the desktop and I'm going to label it my fantasy landscape exemplar. It doesn't mean I'm going to try to copy it or even match it, but that's what I'm inspired by. I want it to feel like an alien place and yet understandable in the same way that this image is. I like that it has a foreground, a middle ground, and a background clearly defined. I like that we see a lot, and yet there's atmosphere, and some things are in lower contrast and some things are in higher contrast. Now the difference between our project and this image is that we are not allowed to put any living things in it or any moving things in it. So no vehicles that are moving like this ship, no people or animals, because we're going to be adding those in a later project. So that might be my exemplar, but that's just to kind of show me what's possible. The other place you want to look for information is in our Canvas course. And when you go to modules, this is the first time we're opening up our assignment sheets, because these are our graded portfolio assignments. And for each assignment we're going to do, there is a one-page assignment sheet there for you. If you click it, it downloads to a PDF. You can print it, view it anywhere. If we just want to look at it within the browser window, we can click on that magnifying glass. And I'm not going to read through this, but I hope you will. What I try to give you with these is simply a description of the project in words, and you want to make sure you understand everything that's mentioned here. The other important thing is the grading rubric, and this will be true of all of our assignments. You can get as many as 3 points for the assignment, and you can get as few as 0, but the only way you can get 0 is not turning something in by the deadline. If you turn anything in by the deadline, even if it's just your sketch, or even if it's just one of your references that you want to use, anything that shows me that you have started the assignment and you've turned it in the right folder in PhotoBucket by the deadline with your name, then you will be able to get a better grade later on by resubmitting. That's what I call acknowledging the deadline, and that's based on professional practice. If you know that there's a deadline for an upcoming project and you don't acknowledge it at all, and you just let that slip by, you get fired. But if you say, I know that you wanted finished comps by today, this is what I have, but I'm excited because if you give me a little bit more time, I know this is what I can do. And that happens all the time in art direction, because you never know how ambitious a project is going to get. So that allows you to then resubmit it later for a whole new grade in this class. When you submit something in the first time, you might get 2 points, and you would get 2 points if you meet all the requirements in this assignment sheet. Requirements like there needs to be 5 reference images blended together to form a believable landscape. And I don't mean believable in that it has to exist in our reality. I mean believable in that all the seaming of the images look believable, look like they could go together. It's not looking like a Frankenstein's quilt of landscape. It all fits its own logic. And if you do that and you submit the sketch, you will get 2 points. You'll have met the requirements. But if I know you could do it better, or if there's certain things that can be improved upon, I'll put those in the comments for you, and I'll help you to improve that to be a better portfolio project. If I think it's just as good as you could possibly do, and any suggestions I make would just be kind of cosmetic and based on my taste rather than your taste, then you're looking at 3 points for it. And that means it's pretty much a finished portfolio piece that I'm looking at more as an art piece than as just a technical exercise. And that's what we're all going to aspire for in our finished work. All right, some tips. Since we're going to be building from found images, we're not going to be drawing our own content here. We're going to be piecing it together from found images, which we'll learn is just as creative. But we're definitely going to need to find more good quality reference than we need. And we're going to have to be selective about it. And we're always going to have to Google image search large enough images. We're actually looking for 10 megapixel or bigger reference images for this, Because if you find something you love, but it's not high enough resolution, it's not usable, because this is a raster assignment. All right. So between the past student examples and the assignment sheets, you should have a good idea of what the assignments are, and you should be able to get started. And that I make that possible for you, so even if you miss a class in which we're introducing an assignment, you still aren't waiting to get started on it. Right. Now, I like to give some professional examples. And usually when I start an assignment, I'll use my own photo bucket page and give you a little bit of a background on fantasy landscape and how it relates. So let me do that really quickly. It kind of depends class by class how much I think you need that background understanding. But fantasy landscapes have been entertaining the public consciousness for a long time. It really hit a high point in the 19th century during the Romantic era. But nowadays, we definitely see more of them created than ever before for all the various types of media. So let me walk you through that. During the 1950s, it was really, after World War II, it was really important in America to have this kind of utopian vision of the future. So a lot of science fiction went from being kind of bleak and philosophical to being more altruistic, like the future is going to be a better place where people will make the world a better place. Walt Disney did that very well. And this was from his future city, Epcot Center. And the way that they, in the 1950s, were best able to really transport an audience into seeing something and experiencing something was not with digital images, not even with photography, but it was with miniatures. So this is actually a built scale miniature. And you can see the curve of the Earth perspective it has, just to give you a hint of the scale. And what I love about this photo of this display, which had moving cars and lights and everything, it's kind of like the future city as a shopping mall, you know, all indoors, and then all parks outside. And you can see a little fairground in the distance. But what's impressive about this is the sheer scale of the idea without really actually showing you that much detail. So it's more about the shapes and the contrasts and the textures that it shows, less about specific detail. And you'll see that carried through in fantasy landscapes today, whether they're very simplified vector posters like this, it's about shape and textures, or this new conceptual art for a sequel to the Blade Runner movie, which is made to look like it's incredibly busy, but when you actually look at it closely, there's not much there. It's just a combination of shapes and colors that really suggests something much bigger and grander. And look at all that atmosphere that's piled up in the sky, so that by the time we get to these soaring towers in the back, you feel like you've crossed acres, but you really haven't had to look at too much detail. Point of view is also very important when you're showing a landscape. I really like the tilted horizon on this, so it looks like you're in a floating taxi or something, and your point of view on the world is a little askew. We're also hovering above, we're not at street level. And you can use all of those tactics in your own fantasy landscape to make it feel more immersive. Just to show you the textures that they were going for, this is a little GIF from the Blade Runner original, just showing the textures of that movie. So you can see how the digital composite artist can take existing photos of, say, like the Eiffel Tower and different buildings and windmills and structures and composite them together into their own vision.